Welcome to today's lesson for Chapter 1, Section 1 of your new textbook. And here we go. Today, all we're going to do is evaluate variable expressions. And there's a couple definitions that you already have in your Google Classroom and your About section. So we're talking about a numerical expression, and that is made up of numbers and operations. So all that means is, what is an operation? Well, we're going to add, subtract, multiply, or divide. Those are a couple that we can deal with. And so it's got numbers and operations. So if we say 3 plus 6 plus 4 minus 3 divided by 2, that's a numerical expression because it's got numbers and operations in it. Next definition is a variable. That's a letter used to represent a number. So you're going to see all through our course, and as we get into algebra, they're going to use x as the primary one, but they're also going to use y, z, a, b, or C, and any of those letters or any letter in the alphabet can be used as a variable, and we're going to substitute numbers in them as we go along with the course. So a variable expression, let's look at that definition, is made up of numbers, variables, and operations. So we may have something like x, because there's a variable, plus 3 minus y, and divided by 4. So we don't know what that is because we don't know what the values of x and y are, but if we were classifying that, that is a variable expression. So finally, the other word we have today is evaluate, and that's when you substitute a number for a variable and find the value. So here's a variable expression. We could just have 3x. Now when we have 3 times x like that, and we just say find that when the value of x equals 2, it's very simple. All we do is plug in 3 times 2, where we plug in the value of 2 in for x, and that equals 6. So over here, if we say 3x would equal 6 for x equals 2. And now what we're going to do is look at another example of a way to evaluate a variable expression. And evaluate pretty much just means solve. We're trying to figure out what that equation is equal to. So now we have this example says evaluate the expression 3b. So now when we have a math problem like this and it says 3b, the b next to the 3 means times. So we could write that like 3 times b, or we could write it like 3 times b. In algebra, we'd like to just put it next to each other because, like we went to in the last example, x can also be a variable, and we don't want to confuse the two. So this would be preferred to write it, or this would be preferred to write it. We really don't want to deal with this, even though it says the same thing. So let's take a look at our example right here, where we have 3 times b, and we want to have b equals negative 90. So it's 3, and we're going to substitute negative 90 in for b. And we put that parentheses around it just so we kind of, if we didn't, we would have 3 and negative 90, and some people might think, well, we should subtract that. But we're not subtracting it, we're going to multiply it. So if we actually multiply 3 times negative 90, 3 times 9 is 27, and we have another 0 on the end of it. And this is really going to be a positive times a negative. So our final answer there is going to be negative 270. So I said in the definition in the last example that you should use a parentheses when we're using a negative number. And that's just going to help us keep everything in line with what we're supposed to do. So if you look at what we're doing here, we just have x plus y equals something, and we don't know what that is. We're trying to evaluate that expression. So if we take our x value for negative 9, you just plug in here, and we'll put that in parentheses to make sure that we know that that negative sign goes with the 9, plus 5 equals something. So negative 9, you remember from last year, if we have 9 negatives, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and we have 5 positives, 3, 4, 5, and we cross these off with 0 pairing, we wind up with 4 negatives. So x plus y equals 4 negatives. That's a little review for some of you from last year. And if we look at this one, it's negative 9 times 5. And if we multiply that out, we're going to wind up getting negative 45. What we're doing in this part of the lesson is we're trying to write variable expressions from words. So we're converting words into an expression that we can use to solve a problem. So let's look at number 32 first, the product of 72 and a number. So product, if we remember from the lesson today, means to multiply. And you can see that also of is something that is a telltale sign that we're going to multiply something. So the product of 72 times some number, and we'll call that number n. But I said earlier in the presentation, we really don't want to use this x when we're using variables or variable expressions. So we can just rewrite this as 72n. And that's the same as writing 72 times n. So that's how we would do number 32. The difference of a number and 1 for number 33. The difference of a number and 1. So when we talk about difference, we're talking about subtraction. So this would simply be a number n minus 1. So just kind of write it out as they say, 13 more than a number. So we've got some number n and 13 more than that. So more than is addition plus 13. And that's all we're writing. We're not solving these at this point because we don't know what the value of the variable is. We're just simply writing expressions. The sum of a number and 9.4. So it's going to be the sum is going to mean add. So it's going to be some number plus 9.4. Let's just finish these two quickly. The quotient of a number and 3. Quotient means divide. So it's going to be n divided by 3. That didn't really come out. N divided by 3, and we can also write that as n divided by 3. And a number, n, divided by 41. And that's the same thing. So you can see we just have to flip through this and work our way through it and plug in what we know as these words: different, sum, more, product, quotient, for the operation that they relate to. And these are the examples we should have worked on in class today. Just to review them quickly for you, look at number 1. We're just going to evaluate the expression when x equals 8, y equals 2. So there's no y in the first problem. It just says x plus 12. So we're just going to write x equals 8 plus 12. And we're going to solve that because it says evaluate. That's going to equal 20 for your first box. X minus y, that's 8 minus 2, and we're going to solve it, so that's just equal to 6. X divided by y, we're just going to plug in 8 for x, 2 for y, and that's going to equal 4. And let's get a couple of these going again. The product of 3 and a number. 3 times the number. Again, we're not using that multiplication sign, just butting them up next to each other. The difference of a number and 7. 15 more than a number is 15 plus n. The quotient of a number and 10. So it's the number and 10 equals. So that's pretty much a recap of the lesson today. And if you have further questions, we'll handle it in class tomorrow.